just a quick introduction. So as Greg mentioned, my name is Brent Mason, president with Citizens Consulting Group, provide architecture services, development services, and a lot of things that you need if you're just getting started in the Power Platform area, particularly training. So if you're looking to get trained up, we have a whole series of courses that we can do in person on Teams and make your life better. All right, so I'm going to share here. Let me know if this shows up. Is everybody able to see my screen here?
Sir.
Yes. Cool. All right, so we're going to talk about implementing map controls. It was maybe, I don't know, 3 months ago that, I don't know, I just started messing with the map control. And I was like, it's been here forever. What does it really do? And I was really surprised about all the functionality that comes out of the box with only a few clicks. And it was pretty exciting for me. So let's see, what's the next slide? So we're going to cover 3 specific features at a high level. We're going to talk about how to put pins in the map, how to do routes, right, and how to do shapes. And all these things are pretty easy to do. Once you know where the potholes are, right? The first time you try anything new in Power Apps, it's kind of like trying to touch your toes. Assuming you're like me and you can't touch your toes, like you're stretching, you almost get there, but you can't quite make it. Couple things important to know about the maps feature. It is a premium feature, meaning if you want to put it in production, it does require licensed users, which means money. But I think if you can find a use case, you can probably make the money, be worth the spend. As a developer, right, you get free access to this tool. So if you're able to create a developer environment using the admin.powerplatform.com, you get free use of this tool and all the associated pieces and parts. One of the things you have to do is somebody in your tenant has to go in and turn on the geospatial services, right? If you don't have those on, the map isn't going to work for you. So I was going to take and just show you where that is at. And so if you log in, if you just do admin.powerplatform.com, you'll come to a screen where you have environments here, and you can choose your environment. See if I can get this right here. Settings, if I got this right, settings, and then it's under features. Where's features at? I always lose it. Users and permissions, no. Oh, product right here. All right, under features and language and features. There you go. And over here on the right side, you have maps and address services. So you can flip that on, or you can turn on full features. And once you have that, then you're good to go. So without that, it doesn't work nearly as well. All right, so they're in the map control, and we're going to actually get into implementing some of this, and you're going to see me in the editor doing a lot of the stuff there. But a couple key properties that you're going to want to be aware of that Power Apps have is there's a location property, which will have your latitude and longitude in it, as well as your altitude and some other information. If you have an accelerometer on your mobile device, you can get all sorts of information around that too. But today, latitude and longitude are going to be our key properties that we're going to use that come out of the box. I'll show you how to set the default position, meaning when the map comes up, is it in Portland, right? Or is it in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean someplace? Also, how to set your current position and talk about zoom level and map style a little bit. So these are just some of the basics. And so I'm going to hop over here into the Power App Editor. And let's see here. I'm going to go to this one here. And I'm just going to put I'm just going to do a new screen here, do a new blank screen. And I'm going to insert a map control. All right. So I can just type map. As you notice, the little diamond here is premium. And there's our map. And I'm not going to select any data sources or anything. But you notice immediately, where does it go? It goes to Redmond, Washington. Whoops, that's not the button I wanted. Sorry, guys. Let's go to 100%. Boy, it is responding. All right, 100% zoom, maybe not 100%. There we go. Okay, and I'm going to put the play. Anyway, so it goes to Redmond, Washington, and the Microsoft headquarters is somewhere around here. And this starts in the map here, right? You can zoom in and zoom out, get the whole world. And I'm just using my my wheel on my mouse to zoom around. Obviously you can use plus and minus keys. You can take and do perspective if you want to, and it really doesn't work well at just in the map view. But then you can also do things like rotate it around if you want to. So clicking on that, and then over on the right-hand side, I'm going to quickly go over the key properties I mentioned: default, latitude, and longitude. So this is where you set your defaults at. So right now, once again, as I mentioned, it's set at the site for Microsoft, where their headquarters is, default latitude and longitude. And so as an example, if I'm holding down the Alt key here, if I move it down to Portland, I'm going to move away from the screen, come back, and you're going to see that it's going to come back in to the default latitude and longitude. So when that screen comes up, and then use default location is yes. And there's, well, there's Microsoft in all their glory. Couple other things, there are a number of different styles you can do. We're looking at the road view right now. Simply click on this. You can say satellite view. There's a Microsoft campus. Choose satellite with road labels. Right now you have all the different roads you can get around. And I'm not going to go through every option, but there's dark, light, shaded relief, contrast, all sorts of things, right? The interesting view is with the satellite view. I think that's the one I personally prefer. Right, and then you can click, and if you want to, you can use in that view. You can start getting some more planar view, I think, so you get a little more perspective to things like that if you want to. All right, so I'm going to go back to the default there, and I'm going to zoom way out, and I'm going to show you one other item. So if you wanted to show your current location, right, there are these two properties here. You can click on this. And as I mentioned in the slide, there's some controls called location, some properties, right? So if I say location, and I can do dot, and immediately you say, oh, we have altitude, latitude, and longitude. So I'm going to match up my latitude with my latitude. And I go over here, and I'm going to click current location, longitude, and I'm going to say location, dot, longitude. All right, and in a couple seconds, it should say where I'm at. It may or may not decide to do that right away, but usually a little green dot. And a lot of times the map thinks I'm down here near Corvallis, near Oregon State, because that's where I'm geolocated to. And usually there's a little dot that shows up about here. Let's see. Show current location. You got to turn that on, right? Without that on. And let's do way out again. Current location. Let's see if it's going to show me where I'm actually at. There it is. Okay. And I'm not down in Albany, but this is where it thinks I am, right? It thinks I'm at the around the bridge in Albany. So there's a little dot for current location. And I simply did that by setting my location.latitude and location.longitude using that property. And what's really great is when you're using your mobile device, using your phone, right? When you're walking around, it can actually, show and track right where you're at. Okay, talk back over the slide deck here. A zoom level, we covered map style. The zoom level is the other thing you can set the default zoom level right here. Right, so if I want to start my default zoom level to 10, all right, and I'm going to move away and come back. Right, you can see that, did it move away? It's moving away and come back. You can see how it's zoomed out a lot more. And if I do my zoom level to, I don't know what the maximum is, but 16 or 20, I'm just going to do 20 as an example. Out and come back in, and you can see now it's zoomed way in, way in. So much so I can't even see the parking lot. So that's your default zoom location. So using those basic controls, you're able to get things set up and running in a hurry. And you saw all I did was I just drug that map control onto the screen. That was it. Nothing more than that. All right, so wanted to talk a little bit about pens, right? And so if we go over to my pen screen, you can see there's different styles of pens, right? We have a little dot here, which is my pen I put in there. Now, I just happen to choose this rounded pen, and there's a car pen, right? And so there's ways to set those up. The other controls we need is obviously latitude or longitude for where the pins are going to be at. We can control the color of the pin. We can control what icon the pin is, and then we can have a card that pops up either when you click on the pin or when you hover over the pin. And so I'm going to quickly show you guys how to do that. Okay, and so what I did to start this up is I just drug the basic map on here, and then I used this button to create a collection. Right, and the collection just simply has two records, right? Here we have the latitude, we have a longitude, we have some information, and I just called it information. You can call these fields whatever you want, right? And I had two pieces of information I want to have show up on the pins when I hover over them, because that's what I set it to. And then I chose the icon that I wanted. So here you can see this little round red icon. This is pin round. If I happen to go here and I say dot, right, you can see there's some other pins I can do. I could do a flat triangle. Right? And then if I reload my collection, everything works right. Now we have a little flag, right? Well, that's what the flat triangle is. I was looking for flag. Now I know what the flag is for. And so with two basic records, right, I was able to get pins on the board and make stuff happen there. And so just to take and scroll out a little bit, you can see I have the car at one location. And if I play the app and I simply hover over it, you can see the card pops up. And see, literally, I have the information, right? And I called the field information. It just shows what the field is called there, and also more info, right, which is the second line there. Now, what did I have to do to make all that magic happen? Well, first I made the collection, and we called it collection cards, right? And I go to my map control here, and I simply go to the items property, and I point that to my collection. All right, so the pins are looking at the scroll up just a little bit here. The pins there, and if I do get a question, so I'm not looking at the screen there. Someone just hop off mute and just let me know there's a question. So we have our items, all right, and then there's some other information here. You can see the bolded ones, particularly there's info cards, item colors, item icons, latitude and longitude. So if I do items latitude, I click on that, I say lat, right? And that was because in my collection, I was lazy. I didn't want to spell out latitude. Then part is it's easy to get the word latitude confused with the property. So just for clarity purposes, I called it lat, right? So I have lat and long, right? So if I go back to my map control and I click on longitude, you can see I just put long, right? And in this case, you have to put those field names in quotes, because if you do long, right, it has no idea what you're talking about. But amazingly enough, quotes around that, and it's pretty excited about things, and the pins actually show up where they're supposed to show up. All right, what are the other key things? Item colors, right? So if you want something to be a particular color, there's pin color, right? And again, I pointed that to, oops, I actually didn't put, oh, I did. I need to format this text to make it look nicer. There we go. You can see pin color, right? I had one pin color here and have a yellow pin color there. So how about we make the, if I want to change that yellow to a different one, and I also did transparency. You notice a 0.8, if I make this a 1, whoops, not a 0.1, but a 1. All right, and I'm going to make this, I don't know, 255, make it a little more red. Right, and no change here. As soon as I reload my collection, boom, we got a different color card. So, and what I've done in the past, rather than just building a table in memory, a collection, right? I'll store these in a SharePoint list or some other data source, and I'll load the records into the collection.
Real quick question for you, Brent.
Yeah.
Is that so? Did you just remember where all the colors and then the transparency is just in the syntax? And is that common across like different objects, or is that only for like pins and like map controls?
Yeah, that's a great question. So across all of a Power App and the Canvas app in particular, right, there's the RGBA function, right? So you have the red value, the green value, the blue value, and then A is the alpha channel, which is transparency. So 1 is completely opaque, going down to 0 would be transparent. So if I change this to a 0.
So the transparency function is always there for that function. It's not just thing. Okay.
Yeah, so if I change that to a 0 and I click on create, you can see the car. Oops, well, it didn't disappear on me. Why did it not disappear? I changed the question is, did I change the right one? I may have changed the wrong pin. Oh,
yeah,
I did. Okay,
so the other pin went away.
Yeah, the other pin right over here. Notice you can't see it, but it's still there if I hover over it. Right, it's just transparent, so you can't see it. So I'm going to change that back to a 1 here. And then reload the data. And there it is. Other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change my zoom level. My default zoom for this map's at 16. I'm going to change it to 14. Well, let's just see what that does like. I'll reload. There we go. Now we get both pins on the map. All right. So items, once again, goes to your data source. And you have your info cards, right? And what I did is, this is just a property that says, all right, for info cards on hover. And that's matching up to, where's it at? Here, right here, show info cards, right? It's just set to on hover. I change that to on click. You know, see it changes to on click right there, or none, right? Nothing happens. Let's see. So we talked about and I didn't put labels on this one. I could have put labels, right? So the label would actually show up here. I did that on some of the other examples. And last but not least is, let's see, and I got to remember where I put it. I always forget for the actual cards to show up. There's info card. Oh, I know what it is. Okay. So how do I get and I evidently ruined something. What did I do? On hover. There we go. There we go. All right. So how do we match up those two fields and get that information to show up? Because there isn't a property right here that I could see, right, that you can match that up. Well, to do that, you select the map control property, scroll up here, and then there's this here, items locations. Right? And this says none because I'm not connected to an actual data source out on the internet. I'm connected to a in-memory table. But clicking on the map again, there's fields, right? And I can say edit. And then I can choose any of the fields that are as part of my data source, in this case, my collection. So if I wanted to include the lat and long on that, I can click on lat and long, add those in there. Right now, when I hover over this, we're going to include the latitude and longitude of those pins. So that's how you determine what you want, what you get to show on the card when you hover over or click on the pin. Once again, you go to choose the map control and go to fields. Right. And you have to edit to get to that. And if you're familiar with forms, right, the Power Apps the regular form, right, you're very familiar with how this control works. Exactly the same, except for there's just text column. There's only one option. You don't have any other options for that. Okay, any other questions about pins that I can answer as far as implementation of it? I'm going to show you another example here in just a minute of a travel tracker app that I did. All right, nobody else raised their hand. Okay, great.
Yeah, no questions in the chat for you, Brent.
Okay.
And cool. Everybody, if you, again, like, don't feel bashful. If you've got questions, comments, maybe even concerns, I doubt it, but anything you'd like to probe about what Brent has showed so far before he moves on? Okay. Let's keep her going.
All right, so continue editing on this one. Hopefully it'll work. So here's an example, and I created this app here, and this was the very first thing I did with the map control. I just decided out of the blue, hey, I want to play with maps, and well, what can I do? What's a good use case for a map? And I said, well, I know that using my phone, it has the GPS, so it knows my latitude and longitude. How about when I go on a walk, right, or a run, I can go in and track where I walk, right? So here's an example of an app that I did, and Mr. Copilot can go away. Thank you. And you can see that, and also I'll go into more details on this. As I was walking around, I said every 15 I think I said 15 seconds, but every few seconds, grab my position, right? So you can see in the morning, early in the morning, I'm running, you can't tell this is a hill, but I'm running up the hill, right? And I'm doing that. So every few seconds it takes and it grabs a pin, it grabs my location and it stores it in a memory collection. And so the way I do that is I have a timer, right? And then whatever the value of the sliders, how many ever seconds it is, and I say on the timer for the advanced, on the timer end, I simply say take, and this is me, all right, in case you had multiple people using the same app, going to the same database, you keep things separate. I have a GUID, which is just as a trip ID to keep each trip individually separated out. I grab a timestamp, I grab my latitude and longitude, and notice what I do here. Location.latitude, location.longitude, and altitude. And initially when I have a data status, which is interim, right? And I have the red, and I think the green pin is where I start and the red pin is where I stop. And so I use that before I send the data off to SharePoint to actually store the data to have that go there. All right, and what else can we do? Anyway, start and stop is pretty much starts and stops it. I have a little database icon down here, which I can take and load other data. Like for example, I want to grab this trip here. I click on load, that's going to load it in here. In a couple of seconds, it's there. There it is. You can see I only had 4 or 5 different points on that. Click on home, and then now once again, it thinks I'm in Albany, so I got to scroll way up and go up here to Oregon. Well, here's where the pins are, Carlton, I guess. One of them. It's interesting. It's not where I collected the data at, but let's see if I scroll over here to this area. And not seeing exactly what I wanted to see. But anyway, we would have the pins for that trip show up here. I go back here to the other one that I did. So, sorry, I'm going to get this one here. So here's me walking down to the mailbox and back. This again is putting me in Albany, which is not where I am. So that's where Comcast thinks I am. And here you can see at our house, walking from my house down the street, get the mail, and then come back up. So that's what we do with that. So there's a real world example of the data. And quickly, I just want to quickly show you, here's the data that actually gets collected in the SharePoint list. User email, a trip identifier, so we keep everything matched together, a timestamp, latitude, longitude, and altitude, which I wasn't collecting initially. And then, is this the first data point in the trip? And then interim each step in between, and then a stop. Right, and that's what I use to color the actual pins when you come back out to the other side. All right, so that's pins. Now we get to do some even more fun stuff. We're going to move on and we're going to talk about routes, right? So super easy to do routing.
Now we're getting interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, is it like Google Maps like routing?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
We'll see how that works.
I didn't know maps were like that sophisticated in Power Apps. That's awesome.
Yeah. So we'll have a starting point, ending point. There are some waypoints which you can collect. So you can have more than one starting and ending. You can have middle points too, and then there's an address control. And the address control is a premium control, but since you're using maps anyway, you're already in premium land, so it's not a big deal. Go over here and we'll see a real world example of maps. Okay, so I'm going to go to my route screen. And here, once again, I just have the map, and I went to a road view this time instead of something else. But I will go in and play the app. And the beautiful thing about address control is you can type in any address that you know, right, that you want to put in here. So I'm just going to start typing in a few 464, right? And then it's going to find something nearby. Oh, let's see, Lake Oswego, right? That's southwest of Portland a little bit. Click on that one. That's going to be our starting point, and our ending point is going to be, oh, let's see. And it doesn't, using this version, you can't type in like a name of a restaurant or something like that. But let's see, I'm just going to choose a couple other 2821, and let's see, Washougal, West Lynn. Yeah, West Lynn will do good. So, and I don't know where these places are, but there it is, right? So immediately it tells me, all right, my estimated travel time is almost 18 minutes, 7.13 miles. And so I'm going to zoom out of this, and so we can go see where this trip is at. And there's the trip right there. Okay. See, starting Lake Oswego, where I think that particular address was on First Street, to Beacon Hill and West Lynn, all the way down there. All right, how do we make that magic happen? Great question. All right. First thing I did is I created an in-memory table. All right, and I'll say thank you for Matt Devaney for showing me how to do this, because at first I was like, how do I get this thing even started, right? And so I read his blog and figured, this is how you do it. So go over here to our route waypoint items, right? So click on there, and this is just a simple table. And the first point is I took the control, the address for, I call add from and add to, and typically said the selected latitude, selected longitude goes into the name. I name those fields. I could have called them anything else, apples and bananas if I wanted to. And see over here, right? So this one is just called add from and add to. And as properties of these, I'm just going to toss some of the labels in here, just to do something on the fly here. So if I say with control, add to, or add from, all right, dot, and you can see there was the selected latitude, right? You can see that there's the selected latitude for our start point there. So it calculates that for you, and then it feeds that into the routing engine. Now, a couple things that are important about routing on the map control itself is you do need to go down here and you need to enable routing, right? And then you also need to enable maintain waypoints. Without these, no routing happens. Now, I could have done a more complicated example instead of just having two address fields, right? Address to and a from. I could have had a gallery, right? That had a plus button, and I could add, items into the gallery, which would be address fields, right? And those could go into a collection, right? Which is driven by a collection. And then I could have multiple waypoints. So it could have been more like a Google thing where I could have a button, I could swap the orders, go one direction or the other direction, add multiple things in, and then you can have it give you the routing for that. So, all right, so how do we wire the map up to that? As I mentioned, we had the in-memory table. So we have two records, right? And this is, once again, a from and a to. I have fields, name, latitude, and longitude. So under the routing section of the map control, right, I simply say, where are my latitudes, right? I just call it latitude. Right? And the important thing is that's matching up with the table, right? Latitude. So that's what this is matching up to here. Longitude, go figure, is longitude right there. And really that was all there is to it to make the routing happen. Then to get the estimated travel time, beautiful thing about that is there's a property of the map called route direction, and underneath route direction there's another sub-property called travel time in seconds, right? So I just simply took that, divided by 60 to get the number of minutes, and that gives me 17.85 minutes. And go figure, there's another property for distance, right? That is length in meters, right? And I went to handy dandy, my favorite ChatGPT, and I said, give me a formula that goes from meters to miles. And it said, just take the number of meters, times it by this constant, which I did. I wrapped into a text, right? So I didn't have a bazillion decimal places, right? Because who cares about that many decimal places? And formatted it. And we get the number of miles. So pretty simple.
That's
once again,
pretty
the first
sweet.
time, yeah. initially trying to figure it out. The hardest nut for me to crack on this particular one was just how do I start keeping track of the data? Right. And again, thanks to Matt Devaney for in his blog article, he just create a table. And I could have done a collection, right, and just had two blank records with these fields in them, right? But the nice thing about this table is always connected up to these particular controls, right, which are the address controls right here.
Cheers to Matt for that.
Yeah. So, all right. So we're about what, 20 minutes in, 15 half hour. I think I've been talking about maps so far. So any
Half
questions
hour-ish.
on any questions on this before we moved into shapes?
Questions, comments?
Going
I
too
feel like you've
fast,
been
too
doing a pretty
slow?
good job. I feel like you've been doing a really good job of like just very clearly articulating how to get this done. So, Brent, it could be just you're so good.
All right. Well, okay. Next, we're going to go on to.
I will say it's pretty impressive, like how easy it is, like where these are just like functions to be able to do like sophisticated routing. Because you could think of like a logistics, type use case, or like like a DoorDash type use case, or hey, we got to do pickup drop offs or something. And tons of businesses do that. And I bet they're paying an arm and a leg to have these type of services that could just be a power app. But you did mention it was premium, right? These are premium controls.
That's correct. Yeah. So, but
Still,
I mean, it's I don't know how much other people are charging for it, but depending if your company already has premium licenses for other things, you know what, then this is free because you're already paying the premium license. You get premium licensing means you get all the premium connectors and as many apps as you want for those named users.
and the premium for those named premium users, what is it, like $50 a month?
I think it's 20 for Power Apps and 15 for Power Automate.
Gotcha. And then altogether, when you also include, like the base subscription, ends up being around there.
Yeah. Yeah, it depends on what your enterprise licensing is, or if you just have small business, right? So you can get a small business for like $12.50 a month, right? And then toss
That's
this
true.
premium on top of that, you're talking $30 a month. So
$30.
if you're a small business and you're doing deliveries, or think even somebody like a gardener, right? If you want to track where your people are, because that's one thing. Yeah, you can get on Google Maps, right? And you can do your route, and you got to type it all in. But does it come from a database, right? If you have a home office where they're saying, "Hey, go to the Johnsons and go to the Joneses and go to the Smiths," right? They can click all that in, and you know what route you're at. And then on your mobile device, if they wanted to see where you're at, right, as you're going from point to point, they could actually track that information. And I mean to say this in a good open way, not necessarily as Big Brother, looking over your shoulder for everything you do. So, all right, let's move on to the next area.
Before you move on, what I
Yeah.
was saying is, versus it being Big Brother, I think of like how much wasted time you have just getting calls from your boss. Hey, where are you? Right? Like, did you finish the shot site or whatever? They could be able to see that. Also, I'm already starting to think of more sophisticated uses of like, hey, plan the route. Like, hey, here are the addresses. But I think maybe you're going there. I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to get it. This is really about just implementing it and not trying to get too deep into any of the use cases. Cause then, yeah, maybe I can do that on my next presentation, right? Hey, how do you actually, collect all this information, map it out, and have a more complicated app? But this is really just kind of helping people crack that hard nut about, map control. And it seems like rocket science until you get, somebody shows you how to do it. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's not half bad. All right, so shapes is next. How do we do shapes? So if we look at shapes here, right now I don't have any data loaded, and if I click on, I'm going to load some of my data in from a SharePoint list, and we have some shapes. So here I have these, polygons that I took and I traced around here. And you see all this gobbledygook in this box here? This is called GeoJSON data, right? Enough to make my eyes glaze over. But it's an important thing to be aware of. And The hardest part I have actually spent of any of this mapping stuff is figuring out this GeoJSON structure. If you're familiar with JSON, it's pretty clear about how things are lined up and put together. But GeoJSON has some specific challenges for this, right? And so I did want to take, and here's a link to the geojson.org. So this is a standard, not that Microsoft came up with, but an actual international standard, right? And there are, I don't know how many pages that this place, 6 pages. I'm going to go down to the bottom. Let's see here. All the way to the bottom. How many pages are there? There are, well, in the standard, there are 28 pages, right? And how do you do multi-polygons? How do you do strings, points? It all is encoded in. I'm zipping through this fast just because, if you want to read it, you can take the time to read it. But it's quite a bundle of stuff to figure out. So I'm going to cut to the chase real quick once I get to the example I wanted, which is right here. Yeah, so key thing here is really just around a polygon. Right, once again, enough to make your eyes glaze over. Key elements here, they have an array of coordinates, right? And what this is these are X and Y coordinates. And the first thing I got hung up on, right, is X and Y, because we always talk about latitude and longitude and X and Y. So you would think that latitude is your X and longitude is your Y, right, when you're doing it, but it isn't. Latitude is up and down, which is your Y coordinate, and longitude is back and forth, which is your X coordinate, right? So when I first started, I was going to Google Maps and I was grabbing the first coordinate, right, my latitude, and I was sticking that in my X value and doing the same thing with longitude into the Y value. And I couldn't find my pen. I couldn't find anything on the map, right? And finally, I don't remember what it was. It's like something dawned on me, like, oh, I'm going to flip these around, and it worked. I'm like, oh, I get it now. Okay, so X longitude, Y latitude. All right, what else can we talk about here? A couple other things. If you're going to hand code any of your polygons, you need to make sure that for the outside edge of the polygon, so I'm going to go back to the actual app here. For the outside edge of the polygon, you need to be doing it in a counterclockwise manner. Now, if you're doing it using the shape drawing feature that comes with the map, which I'm going to show you in just a little bit, I don't think it matters. I never tried doing it in a clockwise manner. I just do it in counterclockwise. But if you code it the other way around, that's not according to the standard. Other thing is, if you had a circle and you had a donut, so I'm just going to grab this here. I'm going to clear out my data. And you're going to see, I'm going to back up just one on the map, right? If you want to put shapes on here, there's a second says show shapes, and then there's enable shape drawing. It's kind of hard to see here, and then enable shape deleting and label editing. Right, so you have to turn those things on to be able to do shapes on here. But if you were to create a circle like that, right, and then you wanted to have a area inside of it, or a polygon, right, area inside of that wasn't part of the shape, those coordinates need to go in a clockwise manner. So outside, counterclockwise, inside, clockwise. And I don't have an actual example of that, but that's one of the things that I've learned about. So I'm going to go ahead and click on delete and get rid of that shape and reload my data here. There's our data in there. Okay. So that is a couple of key things. Oh, and the other thing is, for a polygon, a triangle is going to have 4 points, right? Huh? What do you mean a triangle has 4 points? Triangle has 3 points. Well, you have to start at the top, go to the side, go to the other side, and then back to the top, right? So there's the starting and ending point have to be the same in a polygon. That's just kind of the rules of the game. All right. So how do I make this magic happen? And so this is a combination of SharePoint to store the data. And I tried parsing the data using parse JSON inside the PowerOut function. It was just a nightmare. And, if you're a JSON guru, right, you can parse through this stuff, but it's just, you got a feature collection, then you have features, and you have properties, which are labels and colors. You have an ID, you have geometry, and you have types and polygons, and then you have all your coordinates, which can go on and on and on, depending on how complicated your polygon is. Right. And I'm not sure the reason for this, but the coordinates, instead of being an array of coordinates, right, it's an array of an array. I don't know, right? Now, if you're doing a multi-polygon, which I get, and I didn't do one here, there's actually an array of array of array. Crazy stuff. But trying to parse through that inside of a Power App is tough. I spent most part of an evening trying to figure that out and said, all right, I'm just going to use Power Automate for it. So how do we take and create this inside of our app? So I'm going to clear out my app. All right, so now you can see that my collection is empty. And I'm going to go over here. I'm just going to grab this multi-polygon feature. All right, so this allows me to draw a rough polygon, and I'm going to, first I'm going to move my map around to find something. All right, here's Powell Butte Park. If you're familiar with Portland, you know that Powell Butte Nature Park is on top of a volcano tuft, right? So this is actually the top of an ancient extinct volcano. And so I'm just going to literally start drawing here. I'm going to click there and just drawing down, drawing over. Right, you can see I'm just putting the points on here. And I could go to Google Maps, right? And I could, or Bing, and I could get, oops, I didn't need to do that last one, but I'm just going to draw it around here like this, make it more of a circle. And I could get what each these points on this coordinate, right? And I could hand code this in. Well, why would I want to do that when I can take and do this, right? And now I don't have to do this last point. If I just click on this polygon thing, it closes it up for me. And there it is, right? And then I want to edit the name of this. So I'm just going to click on that pencil button and say Powell. Right, click on that, and then you're going to see the shape one label change. Right, and I don't know if you noticed over on this side when I was doing each one of those things, suddenly the JSON happened. Another thing is, you notice it says it's selected. So if I unselect it, right now, if I reload the data, I'm not going to do it, but it would say selected not. Right, and then I could actually do another one. All right, let's just go down here and let's see here. Where is Mount Talbot or Tabor? Mount Tabor. There it is. All right, bunch of trails in here. So we're just going to do another one. And tracing along here, all sorts of wonderful trails around there. And then I'm not going to finish it. I'm just going to click on this, and it's smart enough to know to put all those coordinates together. And if I scroll down here, you can see the shape one, right? I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of this. Then boom, here's shape one. My next thing, right? So I'm going to just change this to call it Tabor Park. I'll call it Mount Tabor. Right, and see right there, and immediately my label updated, it all changed. Right, and this one says this one's selected. If I go up here, and you can see this one's selected false. Zoom out, here's the other shape I did. I'm going to click on that one. Now this one says, it should say true, but now it says false. Let's see what this one says. It still says Mount Tabor selected. I'm guessing the label's just not updating, but anyway, so now we have two new polygons for our map. Right, and then I'm going to click on Save Geodata, which I'm going to show you the Power Automate flow for this in just a second. So click on Save Data, and I don't have it respond, right? So it's immediately, it's been saved. I'm going to go out here. I'm going to look in my Geodata, and you're going to see I have some box. I have Scatters Mountain, which I did previously. We have Powell Butte, and we have Mount Tabor, right? I just put those labels into the title field and saved all the GeoJSON, right? And it's, you know, a lot of data, right? I'd have to hate to hand code all that in. You know, are the GPS coordinates accurate out to, I don't know what that is, 18 or 12 decimal places, 15, 16, I don't know, right? But close enough, it'll work. And now I'm going to go back to my Power App, and I'm going to clear it all out so you can see all these disappear. And then is it going to do it? Clear geodata. It's not clearing for me. Why not? should be clearing out. All right, well, I'm just going to reload the data here. If I reload it, we should get that plus my Happy Valley ones that I did here. So there's Powell Butte, what I just did, my Scatterers Mountain, my Sun Box, and Mount Tabor. Right, so now I just added 2 new polygons to my map. Yeah, and and I didn't do any real coding to add those in there. All I did was go through there and from the map control and turn on show shapes, show shape labels, and enable shape drawing, and we can delete a shape if we want to. Try to take it out of there. Now, how did I, so the magic is, and this is what I was learning in a lot of the blog articles I was looking when I was researching this presentation, is how do you actually save the data, right? Because if you ever tried to encode JSON, it's not easy to encode right into a Power App. So it's a lot better to actually encode it into, if you can do it by hand, into SharePoint or something like that. All right, so here's where the magic happens with the flow. You can see here's one I did 10 minutes ago. Let's refresh this. All right, there it goes, 2 minutes ago. So this is one where we just saved our data. And when I call it, I pass in all that GeoJSON stuff, right? That we, as you can see here, all it is, and it's all, put together so it transmits over the internet. Okay. Don't worry about the details there, but I did that in there. I did a compose, which grabbed just part of it because I really wanted to see what data was coming in. That's the reason for the compose. I parsed the JSON, right? So I can pull out just the features, right? Because I want this record. I don't want all the extra stuff. And then I pulled out some other information, and then I created a SharePoint item. So I'm going to go actually into edit view and show this to you guys here. And actually, before I do that, let me just show you what I sent. So the button that saves the GeoJSON data, click on that. All it is, I took the text of that and then back up one step here. So map control itself has a property called GeoJSON. And I didn't make this up. This is what Microsoft calls it. So in this case, I have the label. It's showing GeoJSON. And then so I take and here I grab the text of the GeoJSON label and then send that off to the Power Automate flow. So that's the way the flow gets the data. So here, a few more steps. And if I didn't have these composes in here, it would be even less. But trying to debug these things, if you've done JSON online, that it's not always the easiest thing to do. So here I say, all right, I'm passing a text field. I'm calling it GeoJSON. I could call it apples and bananas if I wanted to. Here I'm just getting it so I can just see it just to make sure I'm getting exactly what I think I'm getting. I have the parse step, right? And I'm not going to go into how do we get the schema, but if you use the parse JSON step, you pass in the data and you click the generate from sample and it gives you the schema. Then the key things I did was I did one more compose, which is getting the current item, right? And I'm getting the features. Now, why getting the features important? So I'm going to go over here back to our map. I'm going to click on play so I can grab all this. I'm going to Control A to grab all this data. Copy this, and then we're going to go over here to just got to move my little sharing thing here. And I use a site called online JSON formatter. Let's stick this in. Hopefully this will format correctly for me. All right. So the data I actually care about is I don't care about the feature collection. I don't care about the feature. I do care about the features, but I just want this chunk of data right here. All the way down to here. That's one shape record. Right. And then here's the next shape record. Many points, right? Get all the way down there. Right. And that is what I end up putting in the SharePoint list. So if we look at the SharePoint list, you're going to notice it says it starts with type, feature, properties, et cetera, et cetera. So I go over here and you can see, once again, just like I showed you, type, feature, properties. You don't have to have all that other stuff there. And I've tried hand coding these things with the all the different properties you have to have in there. And sometimes I could get it to work. Sometimes it wouldn't work. I started with some examples that Microsoft provided, and it just ended up being a big challenge. So once I figured out this method, I was like, oh my gosh, all right. I just take the shape and I put it in there and I click the save button and I do a little bit of magic in the Power Automate flow and it makes it happen. So then I just basically, this breaks out those features that you saw. And then I literally just go to create a SharePoint item. And this is the output of the compose right here, right, which is the current item. The label is a label, right? And once again, I'm just going to go back to SharePoint, right? And literally, just grabbing this label right here, and that's what's end up going right here, right? So those are always going to be the same, and that's it, right? It writes it out to SharePoint. Reading it in from SharePoint, you know, this is whoops. Well, yeah, I clicked on it, but I wanted to show the code, right? One line of code. In this case, I'm just pulling in all the records and putting them into a collection called locations. Now, we haven't talked too much about how do we get these shapes on the screen, right? But it's very similar to the way we did pins and routes. So I'm clicking my map control. I'm going to go down here and let's see. So we have our items right here, right? And I just say item collection locations. Right, so that's because that's what this did here. This got all my geodata from my SharePoint list, right, and put it into the collection, right. So for the map, I pointed the items property to the collections, and then down here there's a section about shapes. All right, so what are the shape labels? Where are we going to point that to? Well, magically enough, that's going to go to the title. Right, because in the SharePoint list, I have it called title. And just look at the actual collection itself, right? Location and collection. Whoops, and I went to the wrong app. Location and collections. All right, click on that and view the table, and you can see here it is. Right, and there's your title that has your label name on it. And I have another field called GeoJSON. I could have called it apples and bananas. Again, it doesn't really matter. And so then there's a field in here called shape GeoJSON objects. And I point that to GeoJSON. Important thing, again, make sure you put it in quotes. All right. And what else do we care about? There's one called colors, right? And I changed that to color. Right. And I didn't set the color in the app, right? I set the color manually in the SharePoint list. That's how we got the red versus the blue. What else here? Shapes, items, collection locations. Again, I set that there for shapes. And what else? And that was it, right? You just line up those fields with the names in your data source. And I didn't have to do an in-memory collection, right? I could have pointed it directly to the SharePoint list if I wanted to, but for performance considerations, I don't have a million data points, right? I just have a few shapes. So I just brought it into memory. So there's plenty of memory in the browser for that. All right, let's see. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint real quick.
Question for you, Brent.
Yeah.
Quick question. How do you know if you're ever getting to the limits of that memory? Like, is there a way to check? Or do you just know, like, kind of rough rule of thumb?
Yeah, the short answer, I don't know. I have yet to run out of memory to know. I know we've done some apps for some big telecom providers where they're collecting, 20, 30,000 pieces of information, and the app starts getting slower. It in part has to do with how much RAM do you have on your device, right? How much free RAM, how many other apps that you're running on your app, on your phone, things like that, which determine that. But I truly don't know. That's a good question. How do you know when you're getting near to the limits of memory? It's a good question. I'll have to see if I can find an answer for that and let you know. All right. So we talked about the coordinates, right? So, whoops, sorry. This was just an example of a triangle, right? You have 3 points, but this is incorrect. You need to have 4 points. So to correct this, I would simply have this first, click on it and do that. I would have this first point be echoed here down at the bottom again to create a counterclockwise triangle with 4 points. It's just so unintuitive to say it, but that's the way it is. All right, and we talked about a few things, right? So shapes items is pointing to the data source for your, that's the collection. Shapes GeoJSON objects contains the actual GeoJSON data. Shapes items is your data source again. Right, I've been in there twice. Shape labels is a string, and shape colors is again your RGBA is the way that Power Apps represents colors. Let's see what else we have. I think that's it. All right,
Later, everybody.
see you later.